Welcome back to The Bridges Between Us, a podcast from Caring Bridge sharing real stories from real people navigating health journeys. Stories about caregiving, connection, uncertainty, and the many ways support shows up when life changes unexpectedly. My name is Andy Tiemann. This week I'm talking to Paurvi Bhatt, a globally recognized healthcare executive, public health economist, and founder of Third Eye Focus. Over her career, she's led impact initiatives at organizations like Medtronic, USAID, and the Rosalynn Carter Institute for Caregivers, while becoming a leading voice in the care economy through both her professional work and nearly 3 decades as a family caregiver herself. But it's probably best if I let Paurvi introduce herself.
I'm Paurvi Bhatt. I am a second generation, born and raised in the United States, Indian American. My parents came pre-civil rights in the early 60s. My dad came in 1963, and my mom came 2 years later when he could afford to bring her, and I came a year after that. We began our family life together in Chicago. I'm trained in public health, particularly in public health financing and economics. And most of my career has been in response to national emergencies, global emergencies, and I grew through the HIV pandemic, among the many of the firsts of things that happened for that pandemic. I bring up the professionalization of my work and experience because when I started working, people of working age were getting sick and there was no way to take care of them. So they were taken care of at home. And what that meant were kids had to stop school and come home and help take care of their parents. Elders and neighbors had to stop what they were doing and come home and help take care. And that was happening all around the world because of HIV. And if you pause for a second, that was the 80s and early 90s. That's pretty much what's going on everywhere today because of the fact that our society is aging and the issues that are happening no matter what age that are health issues and social complexities due to health issues are getting incredibly complicated. And at the same time, everyone wants to be taken care of at home. And if that's going on, that has basically kind of replicated what was happening in all sorts of communities all around the world. How do we re-engineer what we need so that we can thrive into the future, especially as we're trying to take care of each other? Our generation is going to be known for whether we took care of each other or not. And when I say our generation, it starts at Gen X now and all the way through because we are feeling it and we're the smallest part of the demographic analysis, right? Talk about hockey sticks when it's about data. When you're at the smallest surface area of the hockey stick is where? Right at the pivot. And that's us. And what do we do before we begin a game? We bang on that point. We start. I'm partly here to bang on that point. It is Gen X just began. If we don't start asking us, we're not ready for the big swoop that's happening right behind us, which is millennials and every other generation. And what we have today is not what we want. We're not the Golden Girls, we're the Breakfast Club. And so the way we're going to do this is going to be very, very, very different if someone would just ask. So I love that we're in this conversation.
We're not the Golden Girls, we're the Breakfast Club. That's amazing when you see pictures.
Yeah, right.
From back in the day, and they were, 42 or something?
CNN has a docuseries called Live Aid, and it tracks what happened during, the Ethiopian famine and how Live Aid began. And I was 18 when that happened. Gen X was 17, 18, 19 when that happened. We did believe if we gathered in a field anonymously and listened to a concert, we could change the world, and we did. Bruce Springsteen, he just came to the Twin Cities. He was in there about all of us, right? We believe that. How we do this is going to be entirely different. It has to be entirely different. And we haven't really even begun this part. And so I really appreciate this conversation because I'd love for it to start the next wave of the revolution about how we're going to thrive as we take care of each other versus opining on how bad it always is.
You're here to change the world. I just want to go how did this begin for you? When did this get instilled in you that you were the catalyst?
Well, I am not. My parents were. My father, Harsha Bhatt, and my mom, Rekha Bhatt. We were in Chicago. As I mentioned, I was born there. So the way the story goes is when I was 3, my mother had her first cancer. I'm an only child because the treatment for that cancer was a full hysterectomy for her. She had cervical cancer then. And my father was a caregiver at that time. And we wouldn't have ever, I've only recently woken up to recognizing that he was a caregiver well before I was his. And at that time, they didn't have a car. We were living in around downtown Chicago. And in a culture of first generation immigrants where aunties and uncles that were basically friends of the parents, right, that came over around the same time were part of became family. And many of them said to my dad at that time, because my mom, at that time, hospital stays were longer for cancer recovery and surgical recovery. They would tell my dad, why don't you leave her, meaning me, with them for 6 months or send her to India for 6 months while you settle the situation down, like take care of my mom and then make sure you can make it to work. And he insisted no. So he made sure I stayed with him. So every morning, he would, with public transportation, get me to an auntie and uncle's house, drop me off there. From there, take public transportation to the hospital, check on my mom. From there, take public transportation to work and reverse that, and did that every day for months. So as many have said, and I've had the privilege of working with former First Lady Rosalynn Carter, and she's the one who helped me see that this is generational and it's been going on forever. We know that in our own family experience, but it's now scaled to such an extent that it's something that we have to see and more than support, kind of re-engineer how we get involved. So that's the beginning of a story. My mom's health issues continued. My dad and I were very, very close because I was an only child daughter. He raised me to take care of a lot of things in case something happened, although he never said that out loud. And he's the one, like many who are the first ones to immigrate, and every one of us has a story of that if we're listening. He's the one that came over here. If you have a microwave oven today, he was part of the group that figured out how to mass produce it. You have it because he was brought to this country to help figure that out. That spirit of you're here to make sure that you make a bigger difference is also what the story of the United States is. Fast forward when I'm 28 and he's 58, and now they're still in Minnesota. We had moved to Minnesota. Part of the microwave oven story, Lytton Microwave was here at the time. He ended up with early-onset dementia. And I was 28 and already in a global career that was about helping people who couldn't get to healthcare in the HIV movement, making sure that we were able to bring health closer to them and figuring out what are the mechanisms to do that. Whether it be financing local organizations that are already closer in figuring out financing that's like group village banking, and then sorting out formal insurance at the end of the day. If you had a health plan today, it covers for HIV because of many of us that work in this space. And under some of my coaching and leadership, we were able to get there. So now we all have it. I was in the midst of that and had to repivot my career. I didn't know anything about the U.S. health system. I was doing so much everywhere else and didn't even know how to sort out employment and what my employer could do, what I needed to do. We had no platform the way Caring Bridge is here now. As an immigrant and in our community, trust is really, 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 in every community, but in ours in particular, incredibly important. As my mom, who I lived with for 13 years as I was taking care of her later in the story, she rightly said when we were watching George Floyd kind of unfold on local news, and I was a little frustrated. I was like, why aren't Asians doing more? She said, you have to recognize we're still the same generation that experienced partition. It's going to be a while before things really, really change where we can actually do. And so now as I reflect on these issues of trust and how this community comes together and why we stay together and how to integrate in it, it will take a while because of where we are in our own evolution from where we come from and also in being here. After my father passed in 2011, then it was just my mom and I, and her cancers were picking up speed. And then I made the decision to move home. Actually, I moved home before my father passed, but my mom and I made the decision to come back to Minnesota. And in that, we had a lovely, lovely journey together. I started to recognize that there's more happening in this space called caregiving. I was not in that space. I was in public health financing, trying to make sure we had access to care closer to home. Never once did I put my lived experience together with my professional experience. And I would say that is the most important thing we can do now. This compartmentalizing is just not working. And if you work in healthcare, if you work in health, if you work in social care, and if you work in finance, have a moral imperative to drop the compartment. If you're struggling on a Saturday and Sunday night because you yourself are taking care of someone, and as Mrs. Carter said, we all are in some part of caregiving, every phase of it, every one of us, not every caregiver. We are all in some phase of caregiving. If that's true, then there's some part of that is a part of our personal life. And if you're inside of these sectors, especially health, and that hasn't entered your Monday morning staff meeting or your board conversation or your decision making, then you're not being the leader that we need right now. You can't be in these sectors and not bring these two things together because you're structuring the system that we need. And if you're struggling in it yourself, then you have to come inside and ask and figure out what are we going to do and take the risks. And I wish I had done more of that. It's all because of this experience, and Caring Bridge is a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you speak of it like it's honorable. It's like duty. You said once, I'm going to read something, that you should lead with what matters most, your values, and don't let other opinions get in the way. Work hard and find a solution, and people in your community will help you. Ask for what you need and know what the ones who show up first without asking will stay with you. That's big stuff, and it feels like that started bubbling up inside you at age 3. You grew up fast, it sounds like, or you had to.
I wouldn't have known any different.
And as an only child, and as someone with an unusual name, trying to fit in from a young age all the way to today. Also, whether you realize it or not, helping to translate for your parents who didn't grow up here and didn't experience those phases of life. School for them was different than was school for me, right? All of that pushes you to grow up fast, right? You don't have the luxury of commonness. It was a different kind of caregiving, which if you ask any child that's a second generation or the one that was born and raised here or raised here of parents that came from elsewhere, this would resonate in that the role we play is a different role. And we're already facing other parts of society sooner because we're helping our parents see some things too. It started from there. And it started from 2 parents who were also playing those roles with their families in the way they grew up. So again, generationally. Where it started to feel heavier when my dad, very unexpectedly, the dementia piece that came in. This was well before we had so much attention on dementia and Alzheimer's, right? This was in the early 90s. So for that time, I'm just barely getting into what it means to be an adult and not having support. Our community, their peers, my parents' peers, they didn't see their parents get old in front of them, right? It was happening someplace else. And because of that other pain, a different kind of pain, but that was going on. And so none of us knew what to do. I didn't see my grandparents get old in that way, or how does everyone every day support each other? And so that pushed a different kind of stepping in and being ready. And no one would have imagined professionally that I would have ended up in a space where no one had the answers yet, right? I was a part of the HIV effort well before there was therapy or even testing, or even it was barely called HIV when I was in. So to be in the beginning of a movement where rights and justice were the first thing was important in shaping how I began. That started in my early 20s, right? So that mattered in all of this and figuring things out. And again, being an only child. So having to speak up and being a woman in our culture and community, whatever culture. So that what it takes to kind of be much more than, it has a lot to do with the roles that we play inside the family. And it's heaviest, I will say now, as a solo ager. And when these chapters are done, when the care ends, when the issue that brought everybody together, because like we saw during the pandemic, like we're seeing right now, we all seem to gather from adrenaline and cortisol and at the immediacy of what's in front of us. And we feel the best of us in that time because sometimes we're seeing the worst of us too. We see it and we're together. And those of us that have been in this a while are working hard to figure out how do you allow for it to not titrate to zero again, right? Like we need this kind of community for a long time. And that brings me back to Gen X again. We've been alone most of our lives. We've raised ourselves. So back to when are we leaning in? There's plenty written about Gen X and the latchkey kids and how independent we are and all the things that helped us be who we are today. Now we need support. We've got to figure out a way that we can stay together in palpable ways. And sometimes voice. Why are we doing this with my voice, with your voice? Because it's really important to be able to have the other senses come into recognizing what care feels like. You can only read so much of that. You have to see it too.
Had Caring Bridge existed back for your dad, thinking about communicating back with your relatives who wanted to know how your mom was doing, can you just paint a picture of that ideal state had it existed and he knew how to use it, and it sounds like he probably would have embraced it, like it could have changed so much, made it so much smoother.
I mean, we're so lucky that we have it now and need to realize that there's some, the innovation that comes when people respond to the moment. And when none of us were focusing on tech, Caring Bridge figured out tech. So let's pause there for a second. And yes, had it existed or had it been more mainstream when our family was needing it, it absolutely would have helped. And the reason why, back then, even mail, they were stuck with telegrams because we were lower middle class at best. Most of our family did not have phones in their own households, which meant you needed to schedule a call. How were you going to schedule that? You'd need to telegram first or write a letter. It would take at least a week or two. So in the middle of that, we've got people like my mom with cancer. And at the same time, elders that are sick in India too, and people just imagining the worst immediately on all sides. So the level of stress when you don't have information leaves everyone to their imagination as to how bad it is. And there's nothing that can bridge it unless communication in the best possible way can somehow be the balm in it. Anybody who's from my generation, from global times, will remember there was this thing called an aerogram. You were not sending letters in an envelope and with paper inside because it's too heavy and that would be expensive. So an aerogram, you can Google it and see, is basically a sheet of paper that you would fold threefold. So you would write on it, fold threefold. It already had adhesive on the edges, and you would lick those and fold those over. And it was already pre-printed so that you would fill out the address and do all the rest, and you'd mail that. So you're basically mailing just a slip of paper. That seems so common now because you get flyers and things all the time. But back then, that's all you could afford to do. And it was so common. They were blue. You would know. You would get excited if you saw a blue aerogram because the same blue aerogram was coming, just looked a little different from the country of origin too. So it was that specific that it made you feel like you were going to be connected. So that's how the communication was going back and forth. Or if an uncle and auntie, one of the family friends, happened to be going to India, then you would just work really hard to make sure they could carry the message for you. That was happening in the late 60s, early 70s when my mom was sick and where my dad needed to make sure there was some connective tissue. In that same period of time, within a few years, both sides of the family, grandparents were also very sick and dying. So my dad in particular, I have a lot of empathy for him. He was holding the weight of a wife who was in her 20s with cancer while his own mother was also facing cancer much later in life and worrying about how this is going to end because none of us knew what was going to happen with cancer. That, again, if you rewind to what was happening at that time. If there was a caring bridge then, with the capacity of what we have with technology today, if the future caring bridge allows for all of this, imagine the comfort of even sitting and holding silence together, holding space together. You were sharing a synchronous moment. And for when you can't, when time difference and the rest is there, all of these other things that we take for granted now, but back then would have allowed for comfort to show up in the written word, even if it could be done with translator so that you could feel it. All we were left with my dad, and we're only all now realizing because now we're the age when we're feeling departures, right? And fear. And so now lately this year, a lot of my family are realizing, wow, Dad sang a lot of sad songs. The only way he could let it out was through singing. And when the songs he chose were really sad ones. And that was the only way and at that time, people just enjoyed listening to songs from where they came from and maybe didn't pay as close attention to lyrics. But now people are, and they would send, I don't know the lyrics as well, right? I'm second gen, I'm English first language. So when it would come forward, it makes me feel sad because it makes me think of my dad. But when people translate for me, I realize, there were songs about mother and a son. And, I'm happy to share, what it's called. But it's basically a correspondence. And it's a whole song in our language, which is Gujarati, of a correspondence between a son who leaves his village and goes to Mumbai to find work, how they're trying to communicate with letters back and forth. And you hear from the mother when she doesn't hear from the son for a while to say, you seem to have forgotten us. If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be there. We're the ones that work so hard and now we miss you. And you hear from the son, I miss you so much that it's hard for me to stay in touch. Which is exactly to your first question, like what would have been different if there was a caring bridge? He was trying to do it by just singing the song out loud. And why does a song like that exist? Because migrant labor was going on everywhere, right? And here, the most advanced form of immigration was going on so that we would get highly skilled here, right? Which is my dad's story. But it's anchored in that song. So it was on a free radio show a couple of weeks ago. I made a request that they play that song, specifically for Bollywood songs and things for my parents' generation to hear. And so many people have been commenting about that particular song. If they knew my dad, they're like, that song was his. I said, it was. Like, now we understand why he was singing it. I said, right, because we're all feeling distant from someone we love.
I can only imagine the tension, turmoil. So, I mean, your dad's trying to pave this he moved here to have a better life for what became you, and then your life continuing on, and then maybe healthcare was better here, I would assume, for your mom. But there must have been moments where he was like, should we go back? Was that ever something he considered?
It's really interesting because here's the tragedy of the whole thing. By the time I could ask him those questions and was mature enough to recognize what was going on was when his dementia took hold. The story of my parents and us is as much of a Greek tragedy as I could imagine. Right when that was he was known for his intellect. He was also an artist. He was an engineer. So, creation was a big part of things for him too. He sang. He was also a volleyball player. Like he just was all sorts of things. And my mom was also known for her ingenuity or diplomacy. Neither he nor I would have been who we are and who we were it not for my mom, who actually knew how to navigate getting through a lot of tough decisions, including, okay, how to go at work today? What you should do it this way next time. My 13 years with her are the years that I became an executive. And that's because she was right there. My dad would say the same. I'm certain of it. But with all of that, what he would have hoped for all of us is for us to bring the very best of what we have into this issue and this problem. He would have stepped in for the ingenuity of this. And where he was feeling like there wasn't someone to the point of like, can you go home? I think what it took was when you leave, you leave. For him to get on a boat and come in steerage and for it to take weeks to get here, you have to break a little bit of that to be able to do it. I imagine that very much. And the people who were there to take care of me at 3, the kids of those uncles and aunties are my brothers now, right? I'm a solo age. I don't have blood brothers. I have plenty of cousins, so they are also there with me. But I grew up with these kids, and we take care of each other, right? And those uncles and aunties are now aging. I'm helping in the best way I can while I'm also sorting things through to help in guiding my brothers and when they take care of theirs. All of that was the recreation of what it took. Was the community you're in locally where you are now is the one. When we came back to the Twin Cities and it was just my mom and I, and by then she was into her 4th cancer. So my mom passed after 5 cancers 4 years ago. So we had from 2011 to 2022 was time for my mom and I. In that time, she also taught me how to open your doors. There's something that we do here in the Twin Cities, which is the Diwali open house. Diwali is a high holy time for Hindus in the fall. It's a belief that you have to believe that the light will come because it's getting darker, right? And I think every one of our ethnic traditions and every culture faces a time of darkness with the belief of faith to help bring light, right? Whether it's in the spring, whether it's in the fall, no matter your faith, there is something about this. And so that's Diwali. And when I was trying to fit in as an adult, so having left the Twin Cities at 18, I didn't come back until much later, now as a leader in a company and struggling, candidly. And my mom said, we got to invite these folks home. I said, I'm not inviting everybody home. And then look where we live. We live in a small place. I don't know that would work. And she goes, if you invite people home, they will openly honor that. And now I continue it in her honor. But what it is the neighbor thing that we are all seeing around the world now about Minnesota. She knew that. They knew that. They had been doing it in rural America all along of like, invite people over. You have to bridge the distance. You can't expect them to reach over. You're the new one. That's what my dad would say everywhere. Make sure you're not exceptionalized. You get inside. Once you get inside, bring them inside because we're all one. So all of that belief, I imagine, is exactly what he said. You'll get home when you can get home. Right now, this is home. And if this is your home, then you have to let people help you here. And how can they help if you don't let them know? I've said that often more recently now that I'm on my own. It's like, how can anyone help you if they don't know? So then you have to find courage in just saying what's going on. Just tell your story and then people will step in and you have to have faith that they will. And they do. We are in a loneliness pandemic right now. WHO rang the bell already. We're here now. Caring Bridge in its mission is so that no one goes through a health journey alone. I was one of the first to ask, so are people feeling less alone when I joined the board? And that made us pause for a second. It's like, yeah, that's more than just a mission statement. That's something we need to deliver on. Are we delivering on that? Are people telling us that? And this need for communication and then see who shows up, but they can't if they don't know. Caring Bridge allows for that because even though, how else could we democratize getting them the word out? After I worked really hard to get my mom, because we didn't have it for my dad, but we did for my mom. And it was during the pandemic when we finally leaned into it. It took a high school friend to step in and say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and start a Caring Bridge page for you. And I fought it. I'm like, no. She's like, no, let me just do it. I'll be the one to hold it. And I'm like, okay. And then it was time. We needed it more because things were escalating and the pandemic arrived, right? And there was so much to it. And then I had to convince my mom. And my mom, back to the partition generation comment, trust. We don't talk about all of these things. And then she realized, she goes, oh, this is all landing on you. And then I heard her, and I knew it stuck when I could overhear her tell an auntie on the phone. She goes, you know what? She's handling a lot. So don't call her or text her. If she texts you, CaringBridge, use that. We all have to learn what it takes now to help these kids. And I'm on the older of the generation that is in this generation, right? My story is done on taking care of my parents. It finished early. They died early in their life. But that said, I'm also one of the first to be in it. What I want is not going to be what a lot of young people are going to want in this, back to Gen X, right? And those that were born and raised here. We broke the seal, I believe, for CaringBridge. And CaringBridge met us where we were to say, they heard me. We have to show the story of this. So this issue of trust and telling your story can fade away, because my dad was instrumental in helping me. If you don't say what's going on, no one can help you. We were able to get them. And what showed up, we would get, of course, food at the doorstep, right? A different kind of hot dish that was showing up at the doorstep, right? Because we were doing this. I had the hardest time getting my mom to help convey to all the aunties to use Meal Train, which was an offering on CaringBridge to help us organize how much is coming. And my mom was right. She goes, if you think an auntie is going to publicly disclose what they're going to give versus anyone else, so that's the chit chat of, did you get that? She's just bringing rice. I'm bringing a pretty complicated dish. She's like, that ain't ever going to happen. Just take whatever comes on the doorstep. I'll just make sure that they don't bother you. I said, okay. And it ended up being a partnership. My mom and I would, block and tackle together. I would like to think that when the time comes for others, and it hasn't yet, but when it does, that people will more easily step into using CaringBridge. The belief is efficiency, but the efficiency is for the family. It's not for the health system. And when you make it efficient for the family and you make it efficient for the community to show that they care at a time of deep loneliness, that is the greatest service you can offer. And that's why people want to lean in and give, because it isn't just writing a check. You're just taking down all the barriers of entry that are there, so that, just like as my mom said, you realize how much she's carrying right now. These kids are carrying this. Make it easier for them. The one thing that I would say that's different, and I say it for myself too, we lived together, so she could see that I was redirecting my saved time to her. I would just challenge all of us with all of these efficiencies that technology is offering us. Where's this unlocked time going? If it's more efficient, I guarantee the person that needs care deep down would wish that you would give in real life time back to them. They don't want to be a burden, so they're not going to say it, and they're going to fully opt in on anything that gives you your time back. But deep down, they wish you would return some of that time for you back to in real life time with them. And that's what we're missing. We're not redirecting that efficiency back. We're trying to stay to our life. This is our life now, and how we take care of each other. This is our life. And that's probably the biggest issue that Gen X will break the seal on, if you allow us to say, because we are this independent. It's going to take a minute for us to realize, no, you were really supposed to knock on the door and go sit with your friends or your elder. It is a redirect. And how do we now use technology to remind people, did you knock on their door? Did you go check on them? Like I did during the time that we had Metro Surge here, and did exactly what my dad said. That's why I remember it so well. If people don't know that you need something, how can they help? And when I finally was able to say, I can't leave the house, and made that clear to my neighbors, then they showed up at my door.
Another story of resilience, caregiving, generational perspectives, and a testament to CaringBridge's ability to connect family and friends across miles and oceans when people need clear communication and connection more than ever. If you or someone you know want to share your story of hope, resilience, or caregiving here on the podcast, send us an email or reach out via the contacts listed on the main page. We'd love to talk to you next. We'll see you next time.